First of all, one of the mysteries of developing relationships with one another is just that. It's a mystery. So sometimes we share too much, and I'm not going to tell you anything about me. So if you want to know me and you want to know more, come visit me later. So I'm not going to tell you too much. Just that I'm from Arley, Montana, Salish Kootenai College. I'm a faculty in the hydrology department. My mother is Salish, and my father is Navajo. So first of all, my people are what we call the easternmost Salish-speaking tribe. So in a lot of ways, we're directly related to you fine folks here. And when you talk about this great flood and being the survivors of the great flood, we have stories about a flood as well, but we're on the other end of it. We're watching it as it unfolds. We're watching the rising of the waters, and then we're watching the receding of the waters, not knowing full well what's happening further downstream. And in that way, because we're kind of on this eastern boundary, some folks would misidentify us as a transient tribe. Transient, as we all know, kind of implies a homelessness. Well, we're definitely not homeless. It's just that our lands were very large, so we moved around very frequently. And in those, what some might call wanderings, that's like aimlessly going about. Well, they weren't aimless wanderings. They were very intentional wanderings. And I was just sitting here thinking, how would you describe that? And first I was going to ask, could you time me so I don't go over? Because I can tend to talk too much. So I wanted to think, how could I illustrate that? So it's like a very large refrigerator. So in order to make a sandwich, well, your drawer with the meat is way in the heck over the mountains. So you have to go way over there to get your meat. And then at some point you got to go back to the freezer because that's where all your food is all dried up and frozen. So in those journeys, in those long journeys, as you can all imagine, and I don't think you have to stretch your imagination too far, that our ancestors had a vast knowledge of the landscape, vast knowledge, one that we probably can barely comprehend today. As I pass over our mountain passes, I examine features, and I bet there was a story about that. But those people are gone, and that story is lost. And what that feature might have meant is, in a way, gone. But as our elders and our ancestors have told us, that knowledge is not gone, it's put away for us. And all we have to do is go and access that knowledge. So really, us young folks, going through academics, maybe not even going through academics, but just going through a journey of life on the res, we're all on a path to seek knowledge. One no better than the other. So that's really the purpose of a lot of the work that I try to do on my home is the knowledge that we gain, how can we repackage it for use today? Because by golly, we just don't live in a teepee no more. And we don't have to shoot buffalo off the back of a horse, etc. Very dangerous, and our people would probably be pretty hurt if we tried to do that again. So one of the things that I've started to examine, of course, is the foundation of all knowledge that is real and true, and that's to go back to our stories of creation. So there's a story which we can't tell in our tradition because if we do, well, we'll get bit by a snake if we do tell those stories. So I don't know how many snakes you have around this country, but I'm not willing to risk it. So there's a story of a monster, a great beast that occupied this great valley. Long story short, he was destroyed and killed, and his heart was thrown up onto a mountainside. And if we have that graphic that my friend here so graciously included in our PowerPoint show at the last minute, because that's just the way we are. We think we don't need something, then we guess that we do. There's a feature on the mountain side that looks like an anatomical heart, and that is what's commonly referred to as the heart of the monster. Well, wouldn't you know, the long story that we have about it, it's tied to a very specific purpose. And it makes a lot of sense that this story has persisted from what we all call time immemorial. That particular heart was observed until all the snow was clear off of that landform. And this knowledge is not something that I grew up with. This is something we had to locate in the pages and pages of anthropology notes that our non-native allies had collected for us. Because some of our old people, as we heard earlier today, had gone through a pretty rough patch, and we acknowledge those rough patches, but now we're trying to bring that knowledge back and use that to make it purposeful. So this little sentence in this one little anthropologist note says, when the snow was clear of this particular landform, the flooding in the rivers were done. So I took that one little sentence and I inserted it into my classroom in a senior level class, and we wanted to explore what does that mean, and does it really correlate to something that's very important today, given the changes that we've had in the climate, etc. So what we've found that indeed that when that heart landform is clear of snow, it lands on the other side of the hydrograph, so on the receding edge of the hydrograph. So the peak is done, and that's been a pretty reliable source for the 10 years of data that I've collected on that. So we've used that and we say, well, that's cool, but so what? I can just go down to the river, and if you're river people, you think, yeah, big deal. I can just watch the river and tell you when the flooding's done because I can see it. But now let's go back to earlier what I was saying in our wanderings, that we don't always live next to the rivers that we might be encountering. So if you imagine this great journey over to the buffalo hunting country, which could take 10 to 15 days, our people would have had this ability to forecast forward and to examine these particular crossings that they might have gone onto. So we take that idea and transform it into a Western science concept called weightability. So there's a weightability index that you take the cross-section of an area that might have been crossed, plus the height-weight product of maybe a person, or maybe a person and a horse. And in that way, we can predict if that particular crossing would be weightable. So then we can correlate that with the timing of the clearing of the snow and the date and time it took to get to that particular crossing. Those are all very scientific things, but more interestingly is the story of our people being able to observe this landscape feature and forecast forward 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 days to know that crossing number 5 is going to be easily crossable at that time. So I can only imagine that there's more of these out there that need to be found again and reclaimed for our people's use. For what purpose now, I do not know, because we don't ride a little horse down the trail no more and have to cross these areas. But there is a purpose for this, and that is hopefully what our students, the up-and-coming scholars, will figure out. So I don't know what my time is. Am I approaching 10? Yep. I am. Okay. So the take-home message is, how do we make this knowledge relevant for the reality of today's youth? If it's not relevant, if it's not purposeful, then it's going to be of no use to them, and they'll go on and maybe make more YouTube videos that are more useful and relevant to them. So I'd appreciate any questions you might have, because the big question is, how do we do that? How do we do that in these institutions that we've created, which look like Western institutions? 4 walls, whiteboard, talking in English, publishing papers, but let's try to think of a way to do it different.